Karen, how are you doing?
Good. I eventually got here despite the mishaps of today and yesterday.
Yeah, we were all over the place. It was today, tomorrow, the next day, could have been any time. But you had a bit of a nightmare this morning.
I did. I was meant to be in Dublin for some work bits, which was an issue for me trying to pick a day for doing this. And I got up as far as Fermoy. I'm living in Cork. Got up as far as Fermoy, and the light came on the dashboard, and I was like, oh God! And I don't have a good history with cars. So I was like, I better be safe rather than sorry here.
Yeah.
But turns out it was just a filter because I hadn't been driving my car enough. So I was like, can I claim that off the government? So after this 5K limit lockdown,
Dead right.
considering it's their fault.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so you haven't been driving much, but I'm sure you're going to get back to driving a whole pile now that restrictions are
Oh,
eased. You're going to be busy.
definitely. From both a work perspective, but also just I love heading off for the day, climbing a mountain, jumping in the sea somewhere. So I was in Kerry on Monday, so clearly that didn't do enough to clear this filter, but I'll be back there soon enough, and hopefully it won't recur.
Yeah, you would have thought there would be enough driving around Kerry now to keep the car going, but
So.
obviously not. So have you got back to working with teams in the evenings or
Yeah,
whatnot?
just this week just gone. So I'm not involved with any senior intercounty teams, which would have been back to the last couple of weeks. I'm physio with Cork Con down here in Cork City. So we got back out into the pitch on Tuesday. Like I had been seeing athletes individually for rehab sessions and for different assessments. But Tuesday was the first night where kind of everyone was back out on the pitch, which was great. I was literally the first one there, and I was like, sign me up. Like I was there just watching the kickers kick around for half an hour because I had nothing to do. But no, I was delighted to be back.
Yeah, ready to go. Any mishaps or all go well in the first session back?
We did actually have one guy that has a grade 1 hamstring injury, so not the end of the world. So that was the only issue, which I'm kind of glad of. I was preparing myself mentally to maybe see a little bit more, but to be fair now to the coaches in Cork on, we have been talking a good bit over the last couple of weeks as to how to approach this particular session and the next couple of sessions. I think rugby is a little bit I suppose it has a bit more of a run into competitive fixtures, considering the AIL isn't going to be starting until the end of August. There's going to be no league games or anything in between. Whereas this probably is more kind of challenge games and league fixtures with club GA teams over the next couple of weeks and months. So they probably have a bit more leeway in that regard.
And challenge games are just as important as the championship.
Exactly. No, that's what I'm saying. We don't have anything like that at all to look forward to. So from a training perspective, we can kind of ease in that. They had a bit of tag rugby there on Tuesday night, which was nice. So
And this fella just made a line break.
Is nice. Huh?
He just made a line break and was running for the try line. And
exactly. Because I was out in the pitch with a couple of our longer term injuries, and he toddled over, and I was like, I knew it was going to happen. I was just figuring out which one it would be.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big one, isn't it? Like even coming back from the last lockdown, and even now, people are trying to get back to training really, really quickly. And I think they can just go back to sprinting willy-nilly, like without having done anything over months and months. And hamstrings are the ones that keep popping up.
I think with hamstrings, it's the lack of exposure to high-speed running. I think you can be very active in your lockdown home gym setup or kind of down the pitch, but to actually place yourself into a collective, perhaps competitive environment, the speeds that you're going to reach, or the positions even that you'll be starting from in those scenarios just can't be replicated at home on your own. And obviously we know from a hamstring perspective, it is that kind of chronic exposure to high speeds that prevent those type of injuries or reduce them at least. And I've heard actually anecdotally of a good few, or four actually. So it was two and then two more this week, ACL ruptures, which is a disaster. Because from a psychological perspective, you've been waiting so long to get back into sport, into GA, and now to face 9 months without it.
But like with the knee injuries as well, it just happens when there's just a massive training load spike or volume spike, and then you see heaps of them happening. And likewise with the exposure to high speed running, you can't replicate, as you said, running against someone. Like you can do max speed on your own, you won't hit the speed that you will if somebody is running at you. And also there's the psychological component of being in a stressed kind of state because you're trying to go for that try line or you're trying to beat that player, and it's you can't replicate it, as you said. So when people go back to training in the first few weeks, I think anyway, it's very important to try and control the amount of high-speed running volume that you're hitting as best you can, which is why everybody's sick of hearing me talk about tempo running. But like, you can just, it's so useful. Like, you can just chuck it in wherever, and you can, even if you don't have GPS, you can just use your simple maths to calculate what the total running volume or high speed for the session is, and then work on the skill work and the technical, tactical stuff around that. Like, but unfortunately, a lot of coaches will think that they're playing catch up on, and they're trying to get the upper hand on the parish next way over or whatever. And they're like, oh, we need to hammer them now. We need to do loads of sprints. We have to get them really tired because that's how they get fitter. But it's useful having you there as a physio or having an S&C there to advise, but not every team has that luxury.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something the guys down here have tapped into, which I'm glad of. You know, there's no point in us having this kind of knowledge around training, approach to training load, prevention of injury without kind of utilizing it. And I suppose it's all well and good having the information when someone is injured, but I suppose if you can implement it across a team to prevent that. And like, I suppose over the last couple of months, you've seen loads of webinars and different things, people trying to educate club coaches. I know my dad at home must have watched every single one available, trying to upskill himself, because he wouldn't have any S&C background, or he wouldn't have any science background at all. So just trying to educate him on some simple basic principles to kind of go off of. And I found it interesting actually this week. One of my friends, he is an S&C coach working with a couple of teams in Limerick. He posted on Instagram that he found it gas, you know, all the different kind of Instagram people that I would include myself in, you know, trying to direct post towards athletes and players. And he was kind of thinking, well, the people that are actually potentially putting them into these problematic situations isn't the players at all, it's the coaches. So we should be kind of directing our thoughts towards them, which I thought was an interesting take. But yeah, I think we're gonna, like, there are going to be injuries. It's just a case of trying to minimize them, and I think that the difficulty for me as a physio is interacting with people that are injured now, that have missed it for so long, and trying to get them to adhere to kind of the best, I suppose, gold standard in terms of management, which may or may not be a couple of weeks away from the pitch again, which it is difficult, and it's hard to kind of ask of people, but I suppose you do have their best interest at heart at the end of the day.
Yeah. And they're mad to get back into it straight away as well. Whenever it happens, it's like so hard to hold them back, but you just have to explain them, like, we don't want to go 2 steps forward and 1 step back all the time. Yours truly included. Like, we're great at giving advice, but we're not always great at taking it. Like, and yeah, I was coming back from, funny that you were on the topic there, but ACL a couple of years ago, and obviously I was trying to hike up my volume of training because I'm trying to go back playing this year. I hadn't played in a while, and just last week I went, and I've been doing all the high speed running I can. I've been slowly integrating a change of direction, but I went to do a tiny bit of a change of direction, a high speed, and it was reactionary as well. And what did I do? And I got grade 1 straight into my MCL on the opposite side, which would indicate that I was just training too hard and I wasn't listening to my body, and I probably was trying to push too hard to get back. And if the coaches can't even hold themselves to hold back and just go back in a kind of a slow kind of progression, how can we get through to the players that are itching to get back after not doing anything for so long, as you said? So the psychological component and the communication kind of component of being a physio is neglected in the textbooks, but it's a massive thing. And I know that you're doing sports psychology masters, or you did a sports psychology masters, did you?
Yeah,
so that's obviously very useful to integrate into the physio as well.
Oh, it's massive. I had a couple of reasons, I suppose, for going into that field of study, but I think the main one was to better understand the experience of the athlete. You know, I think it became very apparent to me early on that we're not dealing with knees and ankles, we're dealing with people that have knees and ankles, and everyone's experience of that is different, and everyone has a different context, they have different stressors, and they all can impact rehab and recovery. So yeah, that was kind of my rationale for that. And I'm definitely seeing how much, or I'm definitely seeing that influence my practice and how I engage with people, and it's been massively useful. So yeah, it's there's the sides to that master's that helped me from a rehab prescription perspective, from the likes of motor cognition and skill acquisition, but then also from the psychosocial aspect of it as well, in terms of how we connect and how we communicate with athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting as well, touching on the hamstrings earlier, because I have a couple of athletes working with me that are coming back from hamstring injuries, and it might be just the crop that I have, but the way that I would describe these guys is they're all worriers. And they're always worrying about, oh, I need to be doing something to get the hamstring right, and they can't switch off, and then they end up in a kind of hyper stressed kind of state, and then they go back to sprinting, and obviously what might happen is they could have a bit of a postural kind of I don't know, well, they won't be in the best posture for sprinting because their chests and their ribs will be flared, and then they're going into an anterior tilt, and then they'll pull the hamstring again. And sometimes with these guys, they're texting me all hours of the night. It's like, oh, should I do this? Should I do this? And I just, do you know what you should do? You should turn off your phone. You should sit down. You should listen to some music and relax. And the next time we're in the gym, you give 100% to that and stop worrying about around that. And typically those are the type of people that keep getting injured, is the worriers.
Yeah, I think probably linked to that, because I think in very rarely do we see kind of behaviors happening in isolation, and we often see behaviors are linked. And I would imagine they're the type of people that perhaps aren't programming enough recovery and rest time into their week, I suppose. And that's fundamental, that's key, and that's something that I try to kind of even get across on social media a lot. Like, we can train all we want, but if we don't factor in recovery time, we're not going to see the adaptations occurring. And yeah, so that's where I would really link in those type of people that feel like they always need to be going, always need to be improving, and always need to be, I suppose, putting stimulus through the hamstring. And then I suppose also you're factoring in things like kinesiophobia, in terms of how they're actually approaching their running, or approaching their rehab in general, where their attention is when they're actually running. Is it internal, is it external? I've been speaking a bit about that online as well recently. So yeah, this is where I suppose you could be the best physio in the world, knowing in and out the best rehab protocol, but if you don't factor in the other contextual factors, the psychosocial, personality, behaviors, thoughts, myths, beliefs, all these different things, we're kind of missing a step there, I think, if we don't factor those in.
Yeah, it's good. You can have all the theory in the world, but you have to be able to regress it, get it across, and apply it to the individual. And it's gas, like all these lads as well are hurlers, and it's a real Irish mentality that more is better all the time. You know, like, it's like, if we do more training, we're going to get better. But it's like, there's a point, you know, there's a threshold that we'll reach, and we're looking for minimal effective dose, really. And at the moment, going back to training, like from watching the games at the weekend, the standard of hurling was like amazing. Like, the skill level is still there. They're not going to forget how to hold a hurl overnight, you know. So like, in the conditioning work and the strength work, etc., we just need to allow them to train as best they can and do the optimal amount of tactical and technical work. And our main job as sports medicine kind of team people is to keep the athletes on the field and allow them to play the sport. And sometimes it can be hard to get across to a sports coach that, do you know what, this fitness work isn't all that important. You know, it's not going to be the winning or the losing. It's just keep those best players on the field, and we'll have a good run this year.
That's interesting that you say that, because I find, like, over the last 3 years with the Tipperary minors, that's something that I've really had to get across, because, like, we were involved obviously in the Munster Minor Championship, which is back to back, week to week. And in our first year, we had 4 matches over 4 weekends. So like there was no time for niggles. There was no time for anything like that. And trying to get it across, just get across the idea that you might have picked up a slight issue on Sunday, so we're not going to let you train on Tuesday because we want you to play at the weekend. And even just to get that idea across, that we just, I suppose, as you were mentioning, we're not going to lose the skill. We're not going to become tactically unaware if we miss one session. What we will do is we'll let the irritation in our medial meniscus settle down, and just trying to get across that rest and recovery is not the devil. It's not the worst thing in the world. But I think what's interesting as well is how GAA players are programmed to think need to be training at 90 kilometers an hour every night of the week.
190%.
But then when I go to rugby, they don't have that that mentality. They're much more, I think, aware of what they put their body through, and they've a bit more respect, I think, for their body. And I know probably a little bit of that is down to the way the 2 seasons are structured, in that GAA typically is a championship or a knockout system, whereas in rugby you have your 20 rounds. Yes, you might not play for all 20 games. So perhaps there's that element too, that they have that acceptance that they're not going to be available all the time. But I think that's interesting that I've seen that difference, contrast, I suppose.
Yeah. 100%. I had a conversation with a physio yesterday talking about working with a team down in Tip as well, a club team now, and he was saying how he had told the manager that the player in question couldn't train. This is a few years ago now, but he said he could only train, maybe do 50% of the session tonight. This is early in the week and they were playing on the Sunday or whatever. And the manager said, no, he does 100% tonight or I don't want him for the weekend. And he was just like, well, no, he'll be fine for the weekend. Like, just manage him tonight and then he can play. Like, he's not good. Training isn't the thing. Like,
this is where I think education is key, and it's something that I really like. I will always make time for it. Like, you can leave your massage or your phone roll into the end of the session. You need to understand what has happened, why it has happened, what needs to happen for you to get out into the pitch, and what factors will support that or what factors will kind of work against that. And that's where you're sitting the management down, you're sitting the player down, and perhaps their parent as well. And I think you're pissing against the wind, for the want of a better phrase, to just tell someone what they're doing. You have to explain why they're doing it that way, and then your buy-in is it's maximized.
And that's why communication is almost the biggest thing as well, because if you start throwing these phrases like periodization and all this at tactical coaches, is like, oh, wait, what are you talking about? I don't know. So just explain to them. So I've actually with teams in the past, I think this comes from, I think Dublin GAA did this a long time ago, but made small little flashcards for coaches to give to them, and based off that, kind of to tell them if they want to work on something, like I spoke about it last week on Instagram. So say we wanted to do more linear work and it'd be more intermittent, it wouldn't be as high intensity, we'd be focused mainly on aerobic metabolism. I might say widen the space and reduce the defenders so that there's more space for them to run into. And then if I wanted to make it more anaerobic and I wanted lots of change of direction, just shorten the space. Like, but do I need to put in that quantity of information around metabolism and whatnot for a coach? No, just say shorten space for this thing, or widen the space for etc.
Like management, they love simple things. There was one player last year, and I was trying to explain to the coach why he had a bit of a slight hamstring issue, and kind of, I literally just used a graph. I got out my pen and paper, I drew the graph, and he was like, I understand that, thanks Lauren. You know, there was no explanation of external versus internal training load and acute spikes and the acute chronic workload ratio. I literally was like, this is where he is, he's spiked to here, he's now here, we just gradually get him up to here. And he was like, done, Lauren, that's no hassle.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes we kind of overplay our importance and try to be really, really analytical and smart around it and stuff. And it's like, if you're actually very good at your job, you can just simplify everything and then get your message across. But then going back to the point on the rugby, I think as well, the big thing and the contrast is when you're going into a rugby match, there's not one player on that field that is completely 100%. They all have a niggle. Like, so they have all been injured at one point, so they know what it takes to get through a season. So they know that they have to, even in training, it's in the GAA, it's very much focused the players on quantity, whereas in the rugby, they know how to focus it on the quality of the training that you do. So say I'm being held back and I can only do 60-70% of the session, I'm still going to give my 100% for that 60-70% of the session. Whereas maybe it comes from a cultural kind of thing, and thinking the management, if they see me running loads at training, they're going to think I'm doing great in, say, a hurling or GA. And it's like, well, no, if you're running loads, mate, that means you're out of position. So you're actually, you're doing worse. But I think it is changing. And I think, like, to touch on what you said earlier about we're always talking to the athletes rather than the coaches, I think we have to talk to both, because sometimes the coaches and the athletes can be a little bit resistant to new ideas. But I can see myself in a few different clubs, the athletes now are trying to take ownership and say, do you know what? No, this isn't good enough. I'm not going to run in excess of 10K at training tonight, because that's not going to make me a better hurler. And it's coming from bottom up, I suppose, even though it would be ideal to come top down as well. But we have to meet somewhere in the middle, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important, because I suppose the many of the player or of the coaches and managements that we see in place now probably played the game maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and the game has moved on, both hurling, Gaelic football and rugby. So getting an appreciation from the players as to how they're actually experiencing, even things like the warm up, like how was the warm up, like how prepared do you feel for the game after that warm up? Are you gassed? Are you not prepared enough? Like, just getting feedback from players. And I think as well, a lot of players are studying the game at the moment as well. They'll be kind of watching games on TV, breaking things down. You know, they aren't being fed information. They're kind of analyzing themselves. And I think that's it's a characteristic of successful teams, is that collaboration between players, coaches, medical staff, you know, everyone kind of working off the same hymn sheet. And as well, like I have experience in it myself in terms of like making the players, or creating an environment where the players are constantly thinking and creating and solving problems. Because if you're looking to the sideline in the middle of a match, you know, the cards are stacked against you already. And I think that was even a kind of an element of the skill acquisition part of my course, is the cognitive element. And are we kind of making things very easy, following like moving around drills and banging balls off a whistle, or are we trying to get players to think and consider what's going on and making the correct decision based off the situation that they're in, not kind of force feeding them or telling them exactly what to do or where to go?
Yeah. Athlete focus care, I guess, and focusing on their learning rather than portraying how much you know and getting across and trialing different drills and stuff that you saw on the internet. And you're like, oh, I want to try this tonight, see if it works. There's merit in that, and you can do that as well. But the main thing is that they grasp what you're trying to tell them and grasp what you're trying to teach them. But you touched on there the sports medicine team, and I saw you talking recently about the rehabilitation and performance kind of spectrum and where the physio and S&C lie. And I think this is kind of a hot topic at the moment. And I know I do joke at times about it and people are like, why do you hate physios? And it's like, I don't hate physios. I just think that a comprehensive and collaborative approach, as what you just said a second ago, is better than one person on their own given the whole thing. 100%. Yeah,
no, I am. Like, when I think back to my physio degree, if I just went off what I learned in the 4 years in UL, like I would not be working where I am today. I wouldn't have the skill set. I wouldn't have waffled my way this far. I think the physio education is very much geared towards a clinical setting, hospital-based rotations, and it's to get an injured person from a certain level of disability kind of back up to normal or to kind of functioning. And we work with people that want to be high functioning and high performance. So like over the last 5 years, I have kind of sought out as much opportunity as possible to kind of expand my strength and conditioning knowledge, to expand my knowledge of different sports, of different positions, because I didn't have it. And if I don't have it, and I'm not sure many other physios have it if they don't go and seek it out. So like when I finished college, I did an internship in Sports Physio Ireland. above in Dublin, and that was just amazing. Like I wouldn't have been able to cue a squat. I wouldn't have been able to coach a lunge. I wouldn't be able to tell you the teaching points of a deadlift because I didn't know what a deadlift was. So like that was a 3-month unpaid internship that has honestly been probably the best thing that I've ever done. I felt very comfortable in a gym scenario following that. And then I think over the last couple of years, it's been really important to me to have a great relationship with the strength and conditioning coaches, and I've been working with some excellent ones, and I've been working with some that maybe aren't as open to that collaboration, which I kind of felt had a negative effect on the team. I've learned so much when it comes to running technique, when it comes to return to play running drills, when it comes to end stage rehab, because that's your bread and butter. Like, this is where, I'm not sure, maybe if your followers might follow me, but last week on Instagram I spoke about a spectrum. We're working with the same people. We all have the exact same outcome in mind. Just my education, my theory and my understanding is at one end of the spectrum where the athlete is coming to me injured. So I have the expertise around assessment and diagnosis. And then that same player works along that spectrum and gets to the point where they are able to kind of reintegrate back into some form of collective training. And then you're getting that player back and bringing them to that fully kind of healthy, high performance level. So I don't see why a physio or an S&C coach would be working independently, because we're doing the exact same thing, just we're seeing the players at different times or at different aspects. And like that was the first thing that I did when I moved down into Cork Con, was to get the S&C coach. We met for a cup of coffee, and Jesus, we were there 3.5 hours later, just talking through kind of how we would work. And it was music to his ears as well, because it's important for him that the physio was kind of on his wavelength as well. So I found over the last year or so, as a player starts to kind of get out onto the pitch and is moving towards that readiness for collective sessions or collective training, that's when the S&C coach is definitely coming in, if they haven't come in already. And maybe they'll take a session and I'll shadow and I'll watch, or they'll be asking me for like, how much can Johnny do tonight, or kind of what aspects is he able to do, because I find I never let a player go from not training to training. There's a period in between of integration, and it's just kind of explaining to, like, it's Kieran that's here with us in Con. He's good for non-contact. He's good for sagittal running. He's good for change, whatever it might be, depending obviously on the injury. But yeah, no, I've learned so much from strength and conditioning coaches. They're fundamental to what I do. I think they need to have an awareness as well that they have responsibility over some of the injured players as well. So if a player has a broken wrist, well, then you still need to prescribe them some conditioning work to do as well, because that's your bread and butter. But like I have been looking into some strength and conditioning masters, because it's a hole that I know I have, and it's the gap in my learning, and I want to fill it, and I want to be a little bit better. But yeah.
Yeah,
I hope that answered your question.
Very comprehensively. It's good. I think that's brilliant. Like, in terms of I think it's very important that we, as strength and conditioning coaches, physios, have knowledge of each other's area. That doesn't mean you have to be able to apply and do perfectly or to the same level that the other person will do, but you need to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. Like, likewise what you said, I would have had a great knowledge of the S&C and the performance side, but I've had to look into the injuries. And now whenever I wouldn't go trying to diagnose injuries and whatnot, but if ever I do have to, I have a little guess, and then when I get it right after they go to a physio, I'm like, yes. And I'd say likewise, but that's an important collaboration, and I think that's the best way that it works. In what you said earlier is if I can go as an S&C to the physio and say, right, what can Johnny do today? And you tell me how much he can do. And I say, right, I can design a program based around that. I know the threshold to push him to. And that's just ideal, because you want both, well, everyone in the sports medicine team. It's not just the physio and the S&C. You need to have the head coach clued in on this stuff as well. And you want them all working together around the athlete and performing the different things that they're good at to work with the athlete. And I don't think there is a concrete line, as you said. I think there's a crossover point, maybe.
There's no concrete line, absolutely not. And even you're getting hurling coaches involved. Like with Tipperary, I think it was just kind of from outside influences from day one. I had a couple of the Tipperary senior hurling and football physios kind of as mentors to me. And I asked them kind of how they approach things early on, but I started to kind of develop it myself. So to the point where I would have like a rolling Excel file where I had every single player on that Excel file. Like I would have had 4 different kind of nearly tabs in it. And literally the day of the training session, the management would get that Excel file. It would be updated. The players that aren't training are marked in red. They're with me for the full session. The players that are able to do some sort of kind of collaboration with one of the coaches is in orange, and that coach is briefed as to what they can or can't do. And the players that are maybe reintegrating back in fully but haven't got the full green light are in green, and then everyone else is in white. And then a second file, a second page in that is like, it's a traffic light system. They can do contact, they can't do contact, they can do lower limb conditioning, like everyone knows. And then following that, they'll get an email with just like 5 names. Johnny A can do this. He's still a little bit away from training. It'd be great if Shane could take him for some hurling work. And it's just kind of delegating out jobs. And I think that, like, from an injured player's perspective, that's my job. And I think, yeah, someone has to kind of take the reins on that, because I think as well, even aside from injury, players are isolated when they're injured. If a player has, I don't know, a knee issue, but they're able to kind of work on some ball skills, well, then they need to be given the opportunity to work on ball skills. If they're left sitting in the dressing room for the training session, like, I think if you can imagine what that must feel like as a player, to feel excluded from the group. So that's a huge part of mine as well. Or even I'll kind of give little nudges to the management. You know, this player is out for 6 weeks, but would you mind at the end of the session tonight going over and chatting to him and just see how he's getting on? Like, I'll have told him how he's getting on, but just that interaction and that communication. Like, this is why being involved in a team, you have to look at the holistic environment. If you're working in complete isolation, I'm sorry, but I don't think you're doing your job to the best.
It's that buzzword of culture as well, and you're trying to breed a positive environment, because if there's one unhappy player, it is contagious. Like, you want to keep everybody happy, and you want the group to be working well as a whole. And a word we haven't used yet, but needs to be focused on within all sports throughout the country, GA, rugby, whatever, soccer, is enjoyment. And if the players aren't enjoying progressing and learning, then the team isn't going to do well and they're not going to progress. So just like, even talking about working with clubs and whatnot, because we're professionals, we might have somewhat of a professional approach at times, but just fucking relax and have the crack as well. Like, you know, like, and get them to enjoy themselves, because that's the reason they're there.
Like, that's even, again, just subtle things where, let's say, if a player is injured and they can't train for the session, then there's no way in hell they're coming in to meet me, the physio, before the training session. I want them to be in the dressing room having the crack with the lads.
Yeah.
Because that's why they're a part of this team. They're not here to see me. If they're sitting with me for a full hour, like they're just going to get slagged for sitting with Lauren for the hour. Like, go in and chat, and once they're gone out to train, and you've had your crack and you've had your chit chat, come back into me. Or if someone has to do running rehab, but there's a challenge match going on, do the running rehab before or do it afterwards. Go out and sit in the dressing room or in the dugout and have the crack, have the chats. Like, that's why you're a part of this team. You're not here to have a highly functioning hamstring. Like, that's a great thing to have as well, but, you know, like, you're here to enjoy yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And if they enjoy themselves, then they're going to relax more, and then they're going to be probably less likely to get injured when they return to running and return to
but
the
as well, if they're allowed to have an enjoyable environment, or that I'm hopefully facilitating an enjoyable experience, well, then, like, I'd be very surprised if they're like, feck Lauren in her exercises, feck Lauren in her running. They're like, well, you know, she's trying to make my life a bit easier, let's make her life a bit easier.
Exactly. And having them enjoy doing rehab as well, and explaining them why they need to do it is a very important thing. But yeah, it's the importance of having rehab groups, and it sounds like you kind of did stuff like that, because you were saying, like, here's a group of athletes that'll come with me, so then even, they're still part of the team.
Like, if a player, like, obviously if we're adding a cognitive element to, like, a ankle return to play rehab, and we're bringing in ball work, well, then that's where I go over to the manager and say, here, can I have 4 lads, bring them over and get them pucking in balls this player. Even I found actually it was gas. One of the con rugby players, he's at that stage of his Achilles tendon rehab now where he needs to start adding ball work, and I'm just like, lads, I'm no rugby player here. Like, it's going to be more enjoyable for him as well. So we actually got him back into collective training on Tuesday again, just for elements of it, where the other players are helping him with his rehab. So he's not fully rehabbed yet. He's not fully back to play, but just getting players on board. And as I said, it's more enjoyable for him, but also you're kind of getting him back into that collective environment.
Yeah, but like if he's able to run, all well and good, but he has to be able to run and do the skills of the game, or he's not coming back to the game. But have you actually, sorry to jump off topic, but have you seen many Achilles issues? Because initially I thought the first lockdown, like a year ago now at this stage, unfortunately, I thought when they came back that I was going to see loads of Achilles tendonitis and Achilles ruptures, and I didn't see half as many as I thought. It was all hamstrings, but have you seen a lot of them?
After the first lockdown, in the space of I think 10 days, I heard of 5 ruptures. So I was like,
yeah, that's
okay.
a lot.
One of our own club players, actually, it was awful the way it happened. He players like before throwing would like jump up to warm up the hamstrings and warm up his quads. Jumped up just before the throw-in, he ruptured his Achilles tendon. Like, he didn't even he started the game in agony on the pitch. Like, and then we had another player with Con here that ruptured his Achilles tendon. But I haven't heard yet this week, but I suppose this is where we'll start to see the spikes in training load over the next week or two. So maybe give it a little bit, touch wood. We don't.
Maybe we shouldn't be talking about it at all.
Yeah.
Jinxing it.
But I was very surprised that time last year. I think because it's not an injury that I would have come into contact with prior to this. It's not one I would have seen, because when we look at the Achilles tendon, it's the strongest tendon in the body. It doesn't just rupture. So to hear of 5 in the space of about 10 days, I was like, whoa, God, this is a bit scary.
I was basing it off when the NBA and the NFL did they had lockouts back in 2010, 2011, and they did studies afterwards, and there was a massive amount of Achilles ruptures, like as you said,
I
500%.
saw there was 12 in a month or something in comparison to maybe 8 in a year. I remember reading that paper. There's one good paper on it.
And my theory was that, well, if professional basketball and football players ruptured their tendons coming back because they weren't doing the right amount of volume or training volume during the lockout or the break in play, I know that all the lads have been doing shag all for the last while. So I was like, when they go back to play, it's going to happen again. But what I saw more of was hamstring, as I said, and like shitloads of shin splints, like so much shin splints. It was crazy. And like we all know that that's just because of the volume spike, and it's a lot easier to manage. But I was happy enough that I didn't see as much Achilles ruptures as I thought I was going to, but you obviously had a different experience.
Hopefully now we get a bit luckier this time around.
Exactly, but now we may move away from all the boring talk that we've just done. That's everybody switched it off at this stage, I'm sure. You have got to go to a few inter-county match last weekend. How was that being back at live sport?
It was brilliant. Sport is my social life in a way, so even just to be in those environments, and there's people like that I would only ever meet at games. I'd never meet them out, or I'd never meet them out for a walk or whatever. You only meet them at games. So that was fantastic. It's obviously it's still very different. It's very weird. You're kind of sitting down, you're 2 meters away from everyone. There's no cup of tea at halftime. You're not, I suppose, like, as much as we hated it, but like even like parking and strolling in and parking a mile away, like, and then being caught in traffic on the way home, like what I'd give to be caught in traffic in somewhere like Barnsley right now, like, things that you'd often hate. But no, it's fantastic. It's a bit eerie in places like Páirc Uí Chaoimh when you're so far away from the action. Games would be much nicer if we were in like Páirc Uí Rinn or somewhere, but beggars can't be choosers either. But yeah, no, I really can't wait till the day I can kind of hop into the car with Dad and we can kind of chat about the match on the way down and meet like our family. We have like family meetings on the pitch in Semple Stadium after a Clare match. Like that's like, we're all there. That's all, like that's the only time we kind of see each other. So yeah, no, it's it is nice, and I've been very blessed considering the work that I do, both kind of as a physio and in sports media, that I have been able to get to some games. got to rake a Cork GAA club games last year, and I felt really guilty actually, because I'm like, I don't know where half these clubs even are, not to mind be a supporter of them. So yeah, I definitely didn't take it for granted.
But touching on the cultural element, like it's so important for so many people in the country. And even, I know it's not the same now, but even having, now all the games are on TV, they might be on different channels, which is a different issue altogether. But I know lads that were talking to me the weekend and they're just like, oh, it feels like semi-normal again because I can sit down for the day now and I can watch match. And it's kind of seeming like we're getting back to a little bit of reality just from the GAA being back.
But it gives us something to talk about as well.
Yeah.
You know, like we can look forward to the match of the weekend and not talk about COVID case numbers for once. You know, it just feels a little bit like we've something else to collectively kind of look forward to, collectively enjoy together. Like even if it is from the couch and it's over Twitter or whatever, it's nice to kind of have something else to focus on.
Yeah. And are you getting to go to any this weekend, so?
Not this weekend, no. I have a really good college work to do and whatnot. So no, I think there's hurling Saturday. So if I was getting to any games, it'd probably be a Cork game, but that game's in hurless now. So I won't I'm very conscious actually to not like kind of what's the word, talk my way into places, because I'm very conscious of like the fact that so many people can't go and didn't get to go at all last year. So I don't want to kind of arrive and be like, just because I can get in here, I am going to get in here, you know.
Yeah, but you enjoy it so much as well. You shouldn't feel guilty about going to these games if you're enjoying it.
I do, though. Yeah, I really do.
If I was in your position, I would not be caring about anyone. I would be straight at a match every weekend. Like, even from you saying there, you were like, oh, well, we're 2 meters apart. I was thinking, like, I don't care if we're 200 meters apart. If I have the match, I won't talk to anyone.
But if you're frozen on the top of Parky Queen, you might think a little bit different.
True. So then to move on, well, we're still going to talk GAA, but obviously you are a big lady sport personality or an advocate of trying to push lady sport and grow it. Would you consider yourself to be that?
I think I'm just a fan of sport.
Oh, fantastic. The grant this week, what did you think?
To be quite honest, I actually have deleted Twitter, so I didn't see it for quite some time. So it was nice to see the news broken across Instagram. But yeah, like it's phenomenal. Like I've seen firsthand the effort that female Gaelic Games players put into their sport. I was physio with the Tipperary senior camogie team for a year, and I suppose it's kind of sad to think that I went from a senior team to a minor team, yet saw a significant increase in resources for 16-year-old lads. So it's fantastic to see that they're finally being reimbursed for that, or hopefully will be. Like I think it was last year, Aoife Murray came out and said that she spent over €50,000 in terms of driving down from Dublin to Cork each week for training, and that she'd do it all over again. You know, she wasn't looking for pity. But to just fuel expenses, like no one should be out of pocket for representing their county. Like there was numerous times back when I was playing with Claire, underage, where you'd be given like a fundraising card and you should go and fundraise €100 for your own gear, and then you turn up to the male training and they're just handed out a full kit. Like, and I've been a beneficiary of that with Tipperary over the last
and a dinner
years.
as well. They get a dinner as well.
Oh Jesus, yeah, that dinner is brilliant. Stopped me from having to cook, so he. But like it's just simple things like that. But it was amazing to hear that the government are going to approach that from an equal standpoint.
Do they know where it's going to be invested yet, or is that still up in the air?
I haven't actually heard where it's going to be invested yet. I would imagine it might go down to the GPA and might be distributed that way, the same way that the male players get grants. So I would assume, or perhaps through the Camogie Association for travelling expenses.
But it's mainly going to be on the inter-county level that's all going to be invested. Yeah. It's interesting because just from thinking about growing women's sport, obviously we talked about earlier a top-down and a bottom-up approach, and you can't do one or the other. It has to be a little bit of both. But obviously it's important for there to be female role models seen in the media, and for that to be facilitated, and money is a facilitator of that, because they won't be facilitated to play if they can't afford to play, as you just said, and they're not given the resources. But it would be interesting to see, because there is definitely a difference in the amount of resources and financial resources invested into the grassroots as well of ladies and men's GAA and sport in general. And I don't know which one would make the biggest difference to growing the ladies' game as a whole, but this will definitely make a difference. But I don't know, maybe the grassroots might have a bigger impact because you'll grow the playing pool. And then if you grow the playing pool and more females continue playing sport and don't give up playing sport when they reach the ages of 16, 17, 18, then the standard might be raised. That would be my opinion, but not that I'm saying that this won't grow the game in a different way, but it'd be good to see them invest on a grassroots level as well, if you get me.
I think all the money in the world isn't going to fix some fundamental flaws that we still see. 3 different organizations have only caused problems in the last couple of years, very avoidable problems. So you could pump all the money into the world to get 100 young players continuing to play that mightn't have before, but when they're faced with a fixture clash, doesn't really make much of a difference.
I know.
And even seeing the outpouring of criticism for the camogie scheduling for the season ahead, it just like camogie reaches the main news for all the wrong reasons, and that's something that I would like to see change. And it's something that I think it's very easy to sit down and tweet and complain. So even a couple of years ago, I said I can't just sit by and complain. I need to actually help, and that's when I got involved as a social media coordinator with the Camogie Association, because I felt like I can't, be throwing rocks and not get in and actually help a little bit too. So I think money is great and all, but until there's some very fundamental logistics kind of laid out and fixed, it's not going to change anything long term, because it's the fixture clashes, it's the constant controversy that I think is what's probably pulling people away, or like not enticing players to continue playing.
Yeah, you don't want to be an oxygen thief. You don't want to be just pointing fingers and saying that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. You're trying to actively look for solutions. So obviously the fixtures is a big thing that you think needs to change. What else do you think needs to change?
God, I think like the fixtures is massive. That players can feel like they can, if they're training all year long, that they can play and line out for whatever teams that they wish to line out for. Like we haven't seen, other like fixtures has been the main controversy over the last number of years. Maybe a little bit when it comes to rule changes, but that's only been positive, I think, in the last number of years, especially with the camogie changes that have recently been enforced. Like other than that, I think there has been huge changes in terms of the actual leadership in the Camogie Association. I'm not familiar massively with the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, but I do know that there is people kind of coming in and out of there all the time. I think if there was a possibility of, like, I can't get my head around, they all work very closely, like from a locational perspective in Dublin. Why can't they sit down and say, it's going to piss off all your members if we do this, and it's going to piss off all our members if you do that, so let's do this. I can't comprehend that. And I know there's probably long-standing traditions of them being separate organizations, and no one wants to give up their leadership position, because I suppose if they all merge into one, someone's going to lose out and no one's going to have their nice Ard Corla seat on All Ireland final day. So there's that not to consider, but that might be a factor at play as well. But I think the collective decision making and proper implementation of that, because you've seen it over congresses of the last couple of years, that they'll commit to sitting down with different organizations, but like we clearly haven't seen that.
Like, I know, and as you said, like it's going to upset people, but like realistically, rather than all these sit downs, the easiest thing, even though there might be problems with it, is some sort of a merger and having a board. And
you see with the GPA and the WGPA, like the impact that them coming together even had with the Camogie decision, like that they could. And I suppose there's such strength behind that now. Whereas perhaps if it was just a WGPA, they mightn't have had the same impact. Like we can just see that the benefits of those two associations merging together,
But even just changing it from an us and them to an us, a collective us, and then just sit like you're working together now. That's it. Like you're one organization, you're working towards the same thing, and it just simplifies everything. But like I know we're talking about at the top and sit downs and conversations and whatnot and all this, but I just think like as well, looking from a rugby perspective across into GAA and what you touched on earlier, why is there so many matches in the GAA? Like there's so many. It's insane how many matches there are. There's so many
more
different
of them. More of them.
I know, but like there's too much of a good thing, and then they start clashing. And even like my cousins are playing in the Dublin Championship over up here, and they're trying to play two sports like hurling and football. And the way they did it was they alternated up here is the way it's going to be done. So it's going to be hurling 2 games a week, and then they were going to take a break and do 2 games a week football. But sure, if they're playing both, they're just doing 2 games a week, 2 games a week, 2 games a week. And this just isn't thought about. And I know there's 2 sports, so there's going to be a lot of games. But like, I think if we just reduce the amount of games and put more significance on them, not at the top level, but at a club level, it might have a big impact on play numbers and on the amount of injuries and on commitment and on the amount of people that are complaining about, oh, geez, I'm so tired and oh, I have to play this. And...
But I suppose you have to kind of come back to it. Why are they playing in the first instance? They're playing because they enjoy it and they want to play matches. I don't know, does anyone want to go and train all day every day? So I suppose kind of we might approach that with our kind of S&C physio sports science hat on. Whereas I think if I was a player, give me all the matches, you know. So I suppose that this for and against with all of that.
Yeah, definitely. I know I'm being too scientific.
You're being too logical.
Yeah, exactly. It's not fair on them. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. So we'll move on to some quick fire questions then to finish. And the first one is, what's your proudest achievement to date?
It's probably still incoming, but finishing off my master's thesis and hopefully getting that published. It's a fairly novel piece of work, and I think it's pretty much the biggest GAA study from an inter-county perspective that I've ever seen. So probably that.
What's the title?
I'm looking at the psychological response of inter-county GAA players to the COVID-19 pandemic, looking specifically at resilience, coping strategies and well-being. And I got 650 inter-county GAA players, so a decent sample size. Yeah,
savage. That's deadly. So that's why you're so well read on everything on RTP and all that stuff. But is it the pandemic or is it COVID-19?
So it's basically looking at the non-normative transition. So basically you're going from a period of sport participation to a period of no participation. So similar to like a retirement that was forced through injury or illness or deselection. So basically just seeing how athletes are dealing with that from a psychological perspective. Did their well-being drop? What coping strategies they were using? How strong their resilience was. We also looked at emotional intelligence, motivation. We looked at a range of things.
Sure, no wonder you have a lot of college work to do this weekend. So that's fairly comprehensive. Okay, favorite athlete of all time.
Favorite athlete of all time. So I looked at these questions, but I didn't look too much at these ones. So I wanted them to be quick fire, but no, not quick fire. Favorite athlete of all time.
They're never quick fire. Don't worry.
I feel like Michael Jordan's in my head.
That'll be the first time he's been mentioned, even, which is a shocker.
Yeah, I obviously the Last Dance was definitely helpful there, but I read Phil Jackson's book recently, and I suppose it just shone an extra kind of positive light on just.
Which one did you read?
11 Rings.
11 Rings, yeah, savage. I have the other one here, Sacred Hoops.
Okay.
Sacred Hoops. It's not. It's before the Lakers stuff, so it's just on.
I actually thought the book was he fit too much into the one I read. I'm like, I wanted to hear about Dennis Rodman. I wanted to hear like all the crazy shit he did. Like,
there's more on him in the other one, but yeah, like what a man! Like, and his from a psychological perspective and as a coach, like, he just knows how to get the best out of people and manage different personalities, because obviously he had such crazily different personalities throughout his career. It's amazing.
Yeah, how he managed to collaborate them to work together and win consecutive championships is incredible.
So you're going Phil Jackson then instead of Michael Jordan.
We'll go with Phil Jackson. He did play for the Knicks, so
yeah, he
he's
played for the Knicks. Yeah, NBA champion, so he is. So, favorite GA or sporting moment?
GA or sport? The 2013 All Ireland hurling final has to be. I'm a Clare woman. We were so obviously the boys drew the first day out against Cork, and that was just the weirdest experience. I didn't know what way to feel, and then won the replay, but we were at the top tier, and my family were all spread out because we all managed to get tickets. But I was like, there's no way I'm watching Paddy Donlan lift the trophy from up there. So myself and my brother ran down the ramps in Croke Park, and then all the gates closed, but we literally like climbed a gate. I landed so awkwardly on my ankle. So got down like pitch side. Then the tears started coming, and I was like, am I just in a lot of pain with my ankle, or is this like a really emotional experience? But if I could have any day back, it's that one, because just it was incredible.
Yeah, it's a good job you did. As you said, like those are that is the type of story you'll remember and you'll tell everyone forever, is how you did your ankle in Croke Park, jumping over a gate to get down to see Clare lift the All Ireland. But you don't forget it as well. Like, and I don't think you're getting emotional, because we all cry whenever our county wins the All Ireland. Well, unless you're from Kilkenny, because you're used to it. I suppose. Just happens. Who's going to play Lauren Guilfoyle in the movie?
Oh, God, who do I look like? Oh God, I don't know. Anyone who wants to give me a go can have a go. It's fine.
We've had very different responses to that, so don't worry.
I was listening to a podcast. I'm going to say Dakota Johnson, because she's just fab. Yeah, and she's brunette, so we'll go with that.
Okay, easy transition. There could be some method acting. You see, some people have picked very, very outside the box people to play them, but we'll go with Dakota Johnson. So what has she been in recently?
Shades of grey. Jamie Dornan, how are you?
We'll move on. What meal or food are you loving at the moment?
I am loving. I made like Donald Skehan cottage pie last week, and it was incredible. It's probably that.
Yeah. My mother loves Donald Skehan. She never shuts up about him. But yeah, the cottage pie, it's a good one. I made a vegetarian cottage pie for the first time last month. I can say it wasn't as good as the other side. I won't be going vegan anytime soon. What artist have you been listening to a lot recently?
Keenan. In love with David Keenan. You aware of him?
I haven't a clue who David Keenan is.
From Dundalk. Is it Dundalk or Drogheda? One of the two. He's brilliant. He's a pure storyteller. Definitely check him out if you haven't.
Okay, I will. Is he from the kind of Dermot Kennedy style of? Well, nobody's at that level, obviously, but is it slow ballads kind of?
It is, yeah, but it's more. It's nearly kind of like poetry put to music, and he sings it in his own accent as well, which is kind of cool.
That's always good. Well, we already kind of covered, but books you've been reading?
I'm currently reading Emma Dabbery's Don't Touch My Hair, and it's incredible. But I've been reading a good few sports ones, actually. I was looking at my book list there. I read Eddie Jones's recently. I read Phil Jackson's. I read Andre Agassi's a good while back. What else did I read? Andre
Agassi's is nuts, isn't it?
Brilliant. It
so
is
good, like
brilliant. It's like so crazy. Honest. It's brutally honest, and it gave me such an appreciation for tennis that I didn't have before.
To get to that level, like you have to, like I know he started very young and he was forced into it, but like most of them do start that young.
Case study. Deliberate practice. I had my little highlight right. I was like, there is my case study for my next assignment.
Fantastic. You can't switch off the sports psychology head now since you've gone to...
I can't watch a sports documentary. I actually tweeted in my lectures. I was like, you've ruined The Last Dance for me, because I'm just going, what technique are they using there? What's that?
Yeah, for the rest of your life, that's the way it's going to be. Right, last question is, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
That you'll work hard enough, so stop doubting yourself.
Fantastic. Thanks a million for coming on, Lauren.
No problem at all.
Loved it.